Good afternoon, good morning to all, and thank you for joining us in this webinar. My name is Susana Ciar, and I'm Fishery and Aquaculture Officer at the FAO Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific in Bangkok. The study that will be presented today is an output under a letter of agreement between FAO and the Asian Institute of Technology. This webinar is the last of the 2021 APFIC webinar series, Asia Pacific Fishery Commission, which is organized in collaboration with INFOFISH. The webinar will present preliminary findings of two desk studies, one on gender in small-scale fisheries and another on gender in small-scale aquaculture. The publication of these studies is expected to be completed and released during the first quarter of 2022. The desk studies and this webinar contribute to the celebration of the International Year of Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture 2022, or IAFA 2022 for short, which was launched on November 19. IAFA 2022 aims to focus world attention on the role that small-scale fishers, fish farmers, and fish workers play in food security and nutrition, poverty eradication, and sustainable natural resource use, thereby increasing global understanding and action to support them. Let me tell you how we will conduct this webinar. We have one main speaker and two discussants. After this brief introduction, I will hand over the floor to Professor Kyoko Kusakabe of the Gender and Development Studies of the Asian Institute of Technology to present the highlights of the desk studies. After her presentation, we will hear from Dr. Alice Joan Ferrer, Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at the University of the Philippines in the Visayas, who will share her insights and perspective on the topic. Then we will request Dr. Salin Krishna, Associate Professor and Program Chair of Aquaculture and Aquatic Resources Management Program at AIT, to also share his insights and thoughts on the subject. Then we will open the floor for Q&A and discussion among our panelists. I would like to encourage you to please post your questions and comments by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Let me hand over the floor now to Kyoko for her presentation. Over to you, Kyoko.
You are muted, Professor Kyoko.
I'm very sorry. Thank you very much, Sana, for the introduction. My name is Kyoko Kusakabe from Asian Institute of Technology. And thank you very much to give me this opportunity to share with you our preliminary findings of the desk study of women and men in small-scale fisheries. And so this study has sought to answer the following questions. One is what is the division of labor between women and men in specific fisheries and aquaculture practices, and also in terms of their assets, resources, and entitlements. And then we also try to look for critical entry points and opportunity to addressing these inequalities. The methodology that we took is basically the desk study. So we did an online literature search of literature published between 2011 and 2021. So it's only after 2011. And we studied only South Asia and Southeast Asia. So we did not include in our study the global studies or studies in Africa or in the Pacific, but then we have focused only on South Asia and Southeast Asia. And we included all the papers that had anything to do with gender and fisheries, women and fisheries, gender aquaculture, and women in aquaculture. And then we first of all classified all these papers into gender focus papers. And then so the gender focus papers are papers with gender or woman in the title or have a substantial gender analysis. And then we also have gender-related papers. These are papers with gender or woman in the text. So it's not, sometimes it's not really gender analysis, but something to do with gender. So those are the kind of literature that we have gone through. So based on this, this is what we have found. So first of all, I would talk about gender and fisheries. And then after that, we'll talk about gender and aquaculture. First of all, gender and fisheries papers. So in total, we have the total number of papers that we could find in our search was 239. 118 can be classified as gender focused, 121 more as gender related. The top 5 topics that we found discussing this area was one is first, the largest one is small scale fisheries with 103 papers. The second was resource management, 94 papers, and then fish processing, fisheries organization networks, and marine fisheries. So some of the papers were classified in 2, so it's not the total will be much more than 118. But then these are the top 5 topics. And then the top 5 countries that had gender-focused papers were India, Philippines, Bangladesh, Indonesia, and Thailand. So the papers are actually quite skewed into certain topics and certain countries. So that's what we also found in our review. So first of all, what we are talking about is that women do fish. I mean, I think this people who are here are already aware that we do know that women do fish, women are engaged in fisheries, but then what we also know is that there is a lack of gender disaggregated data. So specifically how much women are engaged, what women are actually doing, which is might be different from men, that specificity is not very, very clear. So this kind of unclarity in the specific creates difficulty for policymakers and project workers, because it's very difficult to develop policies and projects that would deliver expected outcomes. So that is the problem. We know this already. This have been discussed so many times. But then the question is that, okay, why so? Why is it that this is perpetuated? Why women continue to be invisible in fisheries? And that is what we need to think about. So in this, based on the literature search, we have identified 5 matters that explains this, and then this is what I would like to share with you for gender and fisheries. So there are 5 matters: the specificity, terminology, perception, participation, and power relations and violence. The first one, specificity. So specificity, so in general, there is an understanding that women and men kind of fish in different places. Women glean at shallow areas and men in deep water. And the kind of gears that women use and men use might be also very different. So that kind of general idea we also have. However, if you look at it more in detail, we do also note that there are differences by location and time. Or like by location is different, through time is different. Sometimes before they were like this, now it's like this, or when the policy changes, also changes. So like, for example, in West Bengal, India, women's participation in really catching fish is very negligible, whereas in Tamil Nadu, women do seed collection, clam collection, catching fish by hand and all that. So they do very different things. Or in Cambodia, more than half of the fishers are women. Or like in the Philippines, seaweed collection is done by women, whereas in Bangladesh is done more by men. So there are differences by location. Also by time, it's also different. It also changes when there's no more men and then women start to take in also. Or like when policy changes, also we see changes. We see that in Thailand, when the ban of fisheries comes in, and then the women also become more actively involved in fisheries as well. So there is these kind of specific differences. So what we need is more gender disaggregated data in order to capture these differences. And then we also need gender analysis at each location in different times. So we do need a regular gender analysis being conducted. The second issue is terminology. So fishing is normally defined as a masculine activity. So like fishers are men. And then that's kind of the idea that we have. So that's why when it comes to fishing association, the members are normally all men. And then so women do fish, but then it's not really considered as real fishing. So those are like terminology on fishing is very much related to deep water fishing that mainly men will be engaged in. And many of the kind of type of fishing that women do are not really included in the word fishing, concept of fishing. So that is a problem because women are never going to be considered as real fishers. They are like assistants or like, okay, there, yeah, in the fishing community, but they're not really defined as fishers. So, like for example, this becomes a problem when when there's a disaster, yeah, and then the government will give some compensation to the fishers, and then if women are not considered fishers, and then they will not be able to get compensation for themselves. Also, women's post-harvest activities are often excluded from fisheries management schemes. So it's not, so data is not collected, it's not in the plan. So that becomes, so women become very invisible. So that's why there is a need to adopt a value chain approach, meaning that we need to see fishing, we need to include in the fishing concept from catching to post-harvest and retail and everything. So we do need the whole value chain to be included in the concept of fishing, as well as not only the fishing itself, but also the periphery activities of sorting, cleaning, and then also mending nets and all that. All these kind of things all have to be included in the concept of fishing. So, and then also including reproductive work. For example, women cook for fishing workers. So this is also part of the fishing activity because they are supporting activity for fishing. So the fishing concept have to be very large, yeah, so that we'll be able to capture women's contribution much better. This inclusion is very important. It's not that, okay, let's just include and then it's not something mechanic, because such inclusion will allow us to revisit the objective of fisheries management, meaning that we have to look at what are we aiming for in fisheries is something that is become very important, because if we look at all this activity all together as fishing, and then we have to look at, okay, where do we strike a balance between environmental protection, food security, trade, export, and then also identity as fishers. So where do we strike a balance? Or where do we give the priority? Is it more to the livelihood? Is it more to nutrition? Is it more to the small scale? Is it the large scale? So the whole importance of where do we invest on in fisheries also have to be rethought, because if we look at the whole value chain of fishing. So the investment importance of insurance, financial access, type of infrastructure development, all these would have to be reviewed. So that's why it's going to be a very the adoption of value chain approach does not mean you just mechanically include them, but then it also means that we have to review and revisit the whole objective of why are we looking at fishery development. The third issue is on perception. So perception, again, similar to the terminology, women are not considered as independent fishers. They are not often being framed as assistant to the fishers. So whatever women are not doing is not real fishing. They might go and then scoop some fish. And so it's not, they don't consider as real fishing. Those fishing does not go into statistic because it doesn't go to the landing site or anything, but it goes straight to the table of the household, and then it's not really counted as fishing. So this perception that women are not doing, women do fish, but then they're not doing real fishing, does create invisibility of women. So this is the problem. So whatever women do is an assistant to the men, or can be reflected, for example, in contracts, that the contract is given to the household for fishing, and then men as a household is considered as fisher, and then women are helping the men. So and then the whole contribution what that women do in fishing become invisible. Women do try to fight for recognition for this. So it's not that women just kind of lay on the ground and then don't do anything, but then they do fight for recognition. So women come together to claim for the support after disaster, for example, in the Philippines, so that they'll be able to get independent compensation and support from the government. So what we need here is awareness raising. So we need awareness raising, not only with fisheries officers, but also community, households, also companies as well. So the fisheries project design, monitoring, evaluation need to be done targeting individuals, so not households, because when we target households, and then the head of household is the representative of the whole thing, and then that's why all the members of the household become invisible. It's very important that we have a more individual approach in projects. The fourth issue is participation. So participation, there are several problems in participation. There are several problems in terms of women's participation. So there are, one thing is restriction on mobility, because women cannot go very far away from home, or they have to come back and then cook, attend to the household work. So that's why they cannot go very far away, or because the social norms do not encourage women to go to the market alone or travel for long distance alone. So this kind of mobility do restricts women to participate, for example, in trainings that is done, carried out far away from the village, for example, or being able to fish, to trade the fish and sell the fish in a faraway market. So these kind of things become a problem for women to take part. Another problem for the participation is women's limited access to skills, technology, and information. So this might be because of education level, because of their social network is smaller than that of men, or because because of their exposure to different kind of information. So limited access to these kind of resources also restricts women's participation in fisheries, and also taking up new fishing technologies. But then there are, so in this area, there are several very interesting initiatives that has been introduced. For example, in India, they have introduced this mobile fish vending kiosk, because one of the problem about fish vending is that around 30% go to waste. So there's a high risk of losing money because of not having access to good facilities. So in India, they have introduced this mobile vending kiosk, which have a refrigerating function, which will allow the vendors to keep the fish for 2-3 days. So and then this has been provided to women's group, so that women will be able to make use of this while they trade fish. Or like in the Philippines, women were able to be a member of fisheries association, fisheries organization that allowed them to gain access to different resources, financial resources and information. So that's also a way that they can access information and technology. Or they also have, in the Philippines, they have this group enterprise in the Philippines, where they also got the support to improve their product by improved handling, like also improving safety standards, so that they'll be able to get high value labels, which would be able to communicate with the consumers that they are buying sustainable seafood product and all that. So this kind of labeling have allowed this group of women have access to a niche market, which are much higher value market. So these are all things that women will be able to gain through having better access to skills and technology and information. Again, another problem, challenge that women have for participation is time. Many times women have to attend to household work, and then because fisheries, as you know, is very irregular in working hours. They have to work in the middle of the night or very early in the morning, very late at night. So that disturbs also the household work that they have to attend to. So the time burden that women have, it becomes almost 24 hours kind of operation that they have. So the time burden for women, because they have to juggle both activities, is quite heavy. So, and then it's very difficult for them to do anything more than that when they have to attend to both the existing responsibility that they have to attend to. And then when women have so much time burden, they also involve children to help up in this and that. So, for example, in Cambodia, it was reported that this kind of time rhythm or time constraint that fishing households have do affect children's education, because children have to help out at night, and then they become very sleepy during daytime at school. So time is a very serious issue for fishing households, which need to be taken into consideration. So what we need here is a bottom-up approach in developing technology with women. So so not just kind of given access to the technology, because the technology might not be very suitable for women. So that's why we do need more participation and more consultation with women, so that we'll be able to develop a type of technology in a type of ways that is suitable for women and men in different ways, because the kind of technology and the kind of convenience that they experience will be very different between women and men. We also need awareness raising on the difficulty in time use that women and men have. And then because this is also very much ingrained into the fishers' livelihood. So, but what we need to know is that we know that these are the way that people use time, and then is there any kind of services that can be available for people to manage the time in a better way. The fifth issue is about power relations and violence. I think many of you have also heard about women's lack of decision-making power. Yes, women contribute a lot to fisheries, but then at the same time, how much do they have decision-making power in terms of how to fish, when to fish, and what to do with the money that they get from fishing. So since women are in a marginal position in terms of fisheries, there's a large lack of decision-making power for women. So also how much women can be involved in fishing is also decided by the husband and other family members, and not by themselves. So even if women said, no, I also want to go and fishing and this and that, it's very much the husband and other male members of the family or the in-laws that would define that, okay, no, you cannot, or yes, you can. So this is very much dependent on the decision-making of the husband and family members. Gender-based violence have also been reported in several of the literature in gender and fisheries. And then gender-based violence affect the household economy and well-being. especially like in, for example, in India, they have been talking about how alcohol consumption lead to more domestic violence. And then, or especially when the fishing is not very good, and then also domestic violence increases. So this kind of alcohol consumption and domestic violence not only reduces women's productivity and well-being, but also deteriorates men's health. But then deterioration of men's health in turn also increases women's care workload. So in the end of the day, it's women, it's gender-based violence, domestic violence deteriorates women's productivity and well-being quite significantly. So domestic violence and gender-based violence, people might think that, well, but that's not fisheries. But then if you go to the voluntary guidelines for securing sustainable small-scale fisheries, the section 6.9 do elaborate that state that all parties should take steps to institute measures that aim to eliminate violence and to protect women exposed to such violence, because it is the responsibility of all parties to create a condition in an environment that is free from crime, violence, sexual abuse, and all that. So, so it's very much part and partial of small-scale fisheries and an environment that we create for fishers to carry out their fishing in a very safe way. So also in terms of productivity is quite important, because, for example, in Cambodia, there have been a report that lower incidences of domestic violence have led to higher income in fisheries communities. So gender-based violence, again, is a very important aspect that we also need to take into consideration in fisheries. Women's group is also another area where it can be a vehicle for negotiation with power relations. For example, India Seaweed Group have fought the ban on seaweed harvesting by receiving training and equipping themselves with better technology for sustainable harvesting of seaweed. And by demanding compensation for the ban to the government, they were also able to get independent ID card as fishers, and also were able to start introducing equipment for sustainable seaweed harvest. So women's group can also be a very important vehicle to change the gender relations that is there in the community. So what we need here is a campaign against gender-based violence. You might also know that now this week is also the week for 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. So this is until tomorrow. Tomorrow is a Human Rights Day. And I started from 25 November. It's the International Day for Elimination of Violence Against Women. So this is a 16 days activism period, and then which is also very important that we are also having this webinar during this time. In fisheries, we do also need to have this campaign against gender-based violence, because as we have also seen, it is gender-based violence is a very much of a fisheries issue as well. So and support for victims are also quite important. We also need to organize and support women's groups, although we also know that women's group is not a panacea. So it's not something that, okay, we organize a group and then that's it. It's not supposed to be the case. We also need mentoring and monitoring so that the women's group can function well. So these are all the things that we see in the fisheries literature. Now, I would like to move on to the gender and aquaculture literature. So in this one, we have reviewed 190 papers. So 85 were gender focused and 105 was gender related. The top 5 topics that were under the gender focused papers are resource management, aquaculture organization networks, pond aquaculture, aquaculture feed, aquaculture policy. So we can see here that most of the studies were more on the issue of governance, but not so much on aquaculture types or fish types or technology. So very much relate around governance was the area that where gender discussion was focused. The top 5 countries is again very similar to fisheries: India, Bangladesh, Philippines, Indonesia. And then in this one, aquaculture, we also have Vietnam as a large, find a lot of studies done in Vietnam as well. So again, we also know that women play a large role in aquaculture. And we also know, like in fisheries, that there is an absence of gender disaggregated data. Again, in gender and aquaculture, I would like to go through 5 areas that need attention for gender equality: access to land and water bodies, technology, income, gender norms, and policy. The first of all, access to land and water bodies. So for aquaculture, especially like pond aquaculture, we need pond. Okay, so pond, yeah, is there. So the pond, in order to have a pond, you also have to have a land. Yeah, so ownership of land, access to land to have a pond is one area that is there. And then, of course, as we all know, women do not, most women do not have ownership to land. So having the ownership of pond is also quite difficult. So improving women's land rights is something that many people have been discussing and debating and advocating for a long period of time, especially in agriculture. But then in aquaculture also, this is an issue. But then the studies have also shown that it's not really only the legal rights that really matter, but then what matters most is women's sense of entitlement, that they are able to use the pond and they are able to raise fish in the pond. They are entitled for doing that. So this kind of confidence and sense of entitlement is actually the most important thing about women really actively being engaged in that pond aquaculture. So that's women's lack of sense of entitlement. So we don't even need legal change. This kind of sense of entitlement, which will be supported by people around her, is quite important. Cage culture have been introduced because to overcome this issue of women's lack of access to land or pond. And then so the cage that you can set up in any water bodies without having access to land. But then of course, you still need access to water bodies. So in some places where that is governed by somebody else, women do have difficulty in even doing cage culture as well. So what we need here is awareness raising on women's role and capacity so not maybe if we do need land rights for women, but then if land rights is not really possible at this moment in time, we can also start from improving women's sense of entitlement, to give women space that women are able to use the pond and do aquaculture. So so support and recognition by people around her is quite important for women's active participation in aquaculture. So awareness raising among family members, community members, that women can play a large role in aquaculture is very important, and also recognizing that women do have knowledge on aquaculture. There were some studies which show that women do get training, women have knowledge, but then they're not able to utilize the knowledge because the family members do not believe in women, that they are able to do certain aquaculture activities. So it's very important that there is also this recognition that women will be able to do aquaculture themselves. And then we have this the second issue is about technology. So technology, I think many of you have also observed and also read about women also being active in backyard pond. Women, it's much easier for women to do backyard pond aquaculture because it's near the house. So it's easier for women to juggle the household work as well as aquaculture work at the same time. So backyard pond technology was considered to be woman friendly because it's easier for women to take part in. But then some research have also flagged that, well, we have to be very cautious about this because the reason why women have more space to do aquaculture in the backyard pond is maybe it's because of the low productivity of backyard pond. Backyard pond aquaculture productivity might be much less than other ponds that in the rice field, in the field, or the cage culture. So because of the low productivity, the men allow women to take control of that because it's mainly for household consumption and maybe it's for small selling. So maybe it's because of low productivity, and then if that is the case, that is a problem, because and then that will kind of ghettoize women into a low productivity activity. So we do need to take into consideration, why is it that women are always often in a kind of be secluded in the backyard pond? So again, we are also saying that family members sometimes do not accept women as knowledgeable, and that also inhibits women to take part in aquaculture much better or in par with their husbands. But then we also have seen that some technology dissemination through self-help groups do work quite well. And but then at the same time, we also have seen self-help groups receiving technology and then doing the production together. But then some better or more capable women taking more of the benefit, taking more of the lead as well as the benefit from technology. And then, so again, self-help groups are not a panacea. We do need to look into these differences among women as well. So, and then some of the technology that is introduced might not be considered convenient for women. So, and then women might not be eager to take part. So what we need here is awareness raising of women's capacity so that the family members can also listen to women and their knowledge, and then so that they will be able to work in par with their husbands and then other men in the community, so that the community will be able to benefit from the knowledge much better. We also need to develop technology suitable for women, with women, because their situation and constraints might be different, also different in different locations as well. For example, in Bangladesh, they have introduced the gillnet, use of gillnet, so that women do not really have to go into the water to, so it's more comfortable for women to harvest fish. So small technology can also make a big difference, and so developing technology suitable for women to use is also quite important. The third issue is on income. Income is that, so aquaculture do provide income. Yes, and then aquaculture do provide employment opportunity to women who otherwise might not have any other opportunity for employment. So in that sense, yes, aquaculture is one area where women can also increase their income, their independent income, or so with the household income. So aquaculture is a very important source of income. The question is, who controls the income? So both women and men work on aquaculture farms, but then so they get the income. So who controls the income? And then when women also contributes to aquaculture, and then when we earn the income, does that income improve women's status in household? Or are women just being considered as unpaid labor, which they work, yeah, it's their duty to work, so it doesn't really raise their say or the position or the decision-making power in how to use the income. So these are things that we need to question. So for example, like family operation is a very is a word that is often used in many of these aquaculture literature. But then they say there's a family operation, so both women and men would take part in, and then both women and men will benefit. But then the question is, is women's contribution visible? Are they paid? Are they given the respect and the control that they are due because of their contribution? So we do need to take into consideration, what do we mean by family operation? What kind of benefit do women and men have through the family operation? So these are things that we do need to question. We also do, many of the literature do talk about gender wage gap, that yes, women and men also work as aquaculture wage laborers as well as in fish processing, but then everybody talks about gender wage gap. So gender wage gap is very much there in aquaculture, which needs to be addressed. So what we need here is that we need training and awareness raising for fisheries officer. Okay, maybe not only fishery officer, also maybe for the community as well, and also for the companies as well. So, but then what we want to flag here, and some literature also flags, is that it's very important that powerful people, the recognition from powerful people can improve women's status. So if the so-called powerful people recognizes women's role and importance of women's knowledge, and then that will influence how people view, how community people view, how household people view women's knowledge. And then when we say powerful people, it also includes fishery officers, because fisheries officers are normally being looked up to as people with power and resource and knowledge. So it's very important for the fisheries officers to be aware of all this and then recognize women's contribution and knowledge. So it's also very important that fishery officers be trained on gender analysis, so that they'll be able to identify gender inequality and also be able to monitor, and also be able to monitor even the women's group, because relations among women is also another issue that can cause inequality. Then the fourth issue is gender norms. Gender norms we also know that gender norm restricts women's participation in aquaculture. In some areas, it's not the gender norms does not encourage women to go into water, or it restricts women's mobility. Or like, for example, in Vietnam, women are considered unlucky, so they are prohibited from going into shrimp hatchery. Or like in Malaysia, menstruating women are not able to work in seaweed culture, again another because of some superstitious belief. So there are gender norms and belief that restricts women's participation in aquaculture, and then we do need to recognize and then take note of this. Women's aquaculture activity, women's aquaculture activity is often considered as an extension of household work. So again, this kind of norm that women would do household work anyway, reproductive work anyway, also may, and then aquaculture being located as an extension of that activity, creates a lot of invisibility for women's work. So gender norms can make women's work invisible. And then, so that's why if it's invisible, we do not know that they're doing, so that's why it can increase women's workload without us knowing it. So, and then without any benefit, because nobody knows how much women are working. So that's why it's very important that this kind of reproductive work and the extension of reproductive work is also being counted and then recognized. Also, another area of gender norms is the issue about food. Now, women are often responsible to feed the family, so making sure that some food is on the table. So when women are engaged in aquaculture, there can be some conflict, because, for example, crab culture. When they do crab culture, normally they do not really eat the crab. for home consumption, most of the crabs are for selling, yeah, because it's quite expensive. So they normally sell the crab and then use that money in order to buy food. But then if, for example, instead of doing a fish culture that could have provided food for the family, they change it to crab culture, and women have to spend all their time to crab culture. They will not be able to do other kind of culture or other kind of activity that will bring food. And then in end, if women do not have any control over income from the crab culture, it creates a lot of difficulty for women to manage the household and for food security of the household. So these are things that we also need to consider when we are doing aquaculture project. Also, this competing water use of ponds, because women do use ponds water for fishing, bathing, also watering the vegetables and all that. Prohibiting women to do that because we're doing aquaculture also makes women's work very difficult. So these are all things that needs to take into consideration. On policy issues, on policy issues, another thing that we want to raise here is that aquaculture is in this margin between fisheries and agriculture. So sometimes gender and aquaculture is being discussed in the context of gender and aquaculture and fisheries, or sometimes it is discussed together with agriculture as part of the backyard farming system. Okay, now this can be a problem because it can be an issue of aquaculture can be in the can fall in between fisheries and agriculture, because fishery aquaculture can be affected by both fisheries policy as well as agriculture policy. For example, ban on fishing can affect women's aquaculture activity of collecting larvae from the water and then to raise, or like the water management for agriculture can conflict with women's backyard aquaculture activities. So these are also affected. So women get affected more through this kind of in-betweenness of the policy, because many activity that women do in aquaculture is again in the margin. For example, backyard aquaculture, pond culture is very much of a margin with agriculture. Yeah, or like or this small scale larva collection is also women's work. So because women do work at the margin of aquaculture, and then they get the kind of effect that they get from fisheries policy or agriculture policy affect women much more than that of men. So that's why it's very important that we notice that gender and aquaculture have to be studied and that a policy developed for its own sake. So with the last two issues, what we need here is we need a packaged aquaculture support. So it's not that okay, we do aquaculture technology and then that's it. But then what we need is a whole livelihood kind of approach, whole package approach that would encompass even the food security and income security, fisheries and agriculture, reproductive work and productive work, as well as the technology, food consumption, income, household work division, social security, insurance, health and nutrition. All these have to be packaged in the aquaculture support, because if we don't do that, women's issue can fall in the crack of different kind of policy and support. So and so that's why we also need to develop a gender policy specifically for aquaculture, because it cannot be grouped with fisheries or agriculture as such. And lastly, we need more research. This is also for fisheries as well. But then what we see is that research is very much skewed to certain countries and certain areas of aquaculture. So we don't have for specific technology or specific species, but then it's more into governance. So we do have a skewed understanding on gender and aquaculture. Also, there's not so much study that conducts gender analysis, meaning that there's very little that focus on the impact of aquaculture on gender relations and women's empowerment. It's more on what women do and what women do, rather than really trying to analyze these power relations that is there in the household and community. So this is, and then with this, I close my presentation. I would like to acknowledge that the guidance from Susanna and Tipalat from FAO, as well as this group of people from AIT. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kyoko, for that presentation. So I hand over the floor now to our first discussant, Alice. Over to you, Alice.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. First, Susan and the team, thank you very much for this opportunity that I now join you in this webinar series. Of course, the topic is very close to my heart. And of course, I would like to congratulate Dr. Kyoko Kosakabe and her team for the work done. I can only imagine the amount of time and effort that you have invested into this work. You did it. The work is really excellent. And well, of course, everybody would agree with me. And I think there's already one who did feedback saying that it was an excellent presentation. So I purposely did not prepare a PowerPoint presentation because I wanted to hear from Kyoko first. And so please bear with me because this is going to be a monologue for the next 10 minutes. So I will make sure I have my timekeeper in front of me. So I have to say at the outset that the content of the work done and the structure of the presentation of the results and the presentation just shared with us, I am more than satisfied. Clearly, there are very good results, and the structure, the recommendations on how we can move forward are very clear. So what I have to share with you this afternoon are just my observations and some extensions. So please let me start now. I'd like, of course, to start with the topic on gender. So this is really very important topic, and I can see 120 plus people in the room who are interested in knowing more about this topic. Because of course, this is a topic of all times, or is a timeless topic. Because of course, gender inequality is a real life issue. So the work of just presented aimed to answer the question, where are the men and women? What are they doing in fisheries and aquaculture? What is their access to resources, assets, entitlements, and so on? And what are the opportunities by which we can respond to gender inequality? So I would say that these are the same questions we've been asking over and over for decades already. My entry to gender work started 18 years ago with my attendance to the Global Symposium on Gender, organized by the Gender in Aquaculture and Fisheries, or GAFS, a section of the Asian Fisheries Society. So I got interested in doing gender work when I have attended that conference. And of course, we did make progress after so many years. And thanks to many organizations pushing for gender work, and also people who are leading into this kind of work, I would have to mention Dr. Mary Williams, and a number of people into gender work. So thanks to them. But the only difference, as I've said, we've been asking the same set of questions, but the only difference now is that this is the first time that I have seen this work done by the team of Dr. Kyoko, focusing on gender researches covering South Asia and Southeast Asia. So, I am excited that they're going to publish their work. So it's going to be a significant contribution to the existing body of knowledge. But let me share with you my observation, and this is with regard to the number of researchers covered. First, are we improving in terms of the number of researchers? So you have covered, the study covered how many? 239 gender-focused, gender-related studies in fisheries, and 190 gender-focused and gender-related papers in aquaculture. So the total studies covered 429. So are we saying that this is already a big number, or is this a low number? We really do not know the answer. Remember that we are covering two big regions. This is South Asia and Southeast Asia, or a total of 18 countries. So, and also, these are the studies conducted for a decade, 2011 to present. So if we divide it per year, we are generating only, at the minimum, 43 papers, 24 papers in gender in fisheries, and 19 papers on gender in aquaculture. And that's on a yearly basis. So again, is this a low, high, acceptable number? We really do not know. But maybe what we can do now, what is the distribution of these numbers per year, especially I'm interested what happened after 2014. As you know, 2014 is a very important year when the SSF guidelines was shared with all of us. So that was 9 years ago. It is the first global fisheries policy to include gender equality objectives. So did people do more research in gender after the SSF guidelines was released? So it would be nice to have an answer to that question. So let's take a look at the top countries in South Asia and Southeast Asia with the most number of gender researchers covered. If you have noticed, same countries in the top 4, and these are India and Bangladesh for South Asia, and Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam for Southeast Asia. Of course, 5th place, Thailand in the fisheries, gender in fisheries researches, and it was Vietnam in aquaculture. So I think what is the important information given to us here is that these top 5 countries shared 73% of the total number of gender papers for fisheries that was covered by the study, and then 66% for the gender papers in aquaculture. So how can we engage more countries to do more research in gender? So that's another question that I do not have an answer. And I think there's a related question in the Q&A box. Again, the next question I have in mind is really, is our pool of gender researchers getting bigger? Well, are we seeing the same names in those papers coming from the same country, or are we seeing different names? Because I'm interested to know if their engagement in gender research is temporary, or have they committed themselves to do gender studies? I think because if we have very few people doing gender work for many years that we've been doing this, then this is really a cause of concern. And my observation is that there has really been no systematic program on gender research in fisheries and aquaculture being carried out either by government fisheries agencies, research centers, or universities. So that again, it will be a cause of concern. And it is interesting that the papers were categorized into gender-related, gender-focused, but I would like also to see how many of those were just covering women, and how many of those were covering men and women. So sometimes there's this big question: when can we say it's a women's study, or when can we say it is a gender study? Okay, so that's always a question whenever I attend the gender conference. Now let me go to the results that were presented. As mentioned, the enduring question here is why so? In the words of Dr. Kyoko, or in other words, why do we have this enduring problem of women's invisibility in fisheries and aquaculture data? And it was really helpful that they were able to organize the answers or the explanations under 5 areas. So I would like to repeat here: for fisheries, specificity matters, terminology matters, perception matters, participation matters, and power relations and violence. And for aquaculture, they have grouped the explanation under access to land and water bodies, technology, income, gender norms policy. And I really like the way the answers were structured this way. So, but what I would like to mention here is that I actually have the same work, but covered only the Philippines. I got the same results. So I have more than 100 plus papers from, they were peer-reviewed and also from the gray literature. And I know that there is really much focus on production, and the masculine culture that shapes the discourse on fisheries development relegate gender equality to a low order issue. And I do agree that women do fish, and we can see women a lot contributing significantly on small scale fisheries. Okay, and women become more visible, and do agree that we really have to do the value chain approach to see where are the women and men in the fisheries, and not just focusing on the actual catching or actual production. And not just the women are found in the post-harvest also, but also in the pre-harvest or the pre-catching stage. They actually have a significant role there. And in a number of studies that I have reviewed, women actually, if you take a look at the roles that they play before the pre-catching or the pre-production period, they enable the next stage to happen. In other words, they enable the catching or the production to happen. And in the post-harvest, the roles they play enables that the next operation can happen. So they actually provide a significant role in if you do it, the value chain approach. And also the narrow definitions of fishing, excluding gleaning and part-time fishing, would mask the participation and contribution of most of the women. So again, this invisibility of women in fisheries and aquaculture really underestimates small-scale fisheries. Just lastly, because I know my time is up, for gender in aquaculture, I'm very happy that this is now given attention, and I look forward to more studies on gender in aquaculture. So I think that is all that I can share with you within my 10 minutes time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alice. Very interesting insights, very interesting questions. Actually, the questions are not only for us who are here, but for all the others who are members of the GAF to tackle. So let's see. Now I would like to pass on the floor to Dr. Salin for his thoughts and insights. Over to you, Dr. Salin.
Yeah, thank you, Susan and Professor Kyoko. Excellent presentation and an excellent review by Alice. So I think I don't have much to speak about. Again, I'm not a mainstream gender specialist, to be honest, because I work more on aquaculture related things, but I'm kind of pedestrian in the gender and in fisheries and aquaculture. But the review here shows, in fact, most of the published papers are focused on the fisheries sector and not much on aquaculture, perhaps. I guess most of the aquaculture studies might have been more on kind of non-peer-reviewed literature, kind of from the gray literature, because I haven't seen much focused really on the aquaculture, because perhaps aquaculture has traditionally been a male-dominated sector, or it is an industry now. But when it is an industry, or it has grown to an industry, there are a lot more opportunities for women. I see a great disparity in this. All the segments Professor Kyoko has kind of compartmentalized very nicely in a very systematic way. In almost all sectors, you can see this disparity, from the small scale to the elite or more elite women who take part in this business, because aquaculture is more of a business these days. And how the backyard technology that is projected at this moment for the small scale sector, I am really doubtful how it can increase the income levels of these poor women if they want to make it as a solution for their involvement or engagement in aquaculture. because most of the backyard pond technology, maybe perhaps it can improve their livelihood in a way, the food security rather than their income security. So that is a big question, how we can improve their income. Income levels are good for salaried women. If they are salaried, the income goes to them. They have this disposable income with them as their own. But if they engage in aquaculture or in a production activity, even if it's a family labor, the income does not really go to them because it may be shared or it may be taken by somebody else in a way. And it's a traditional custom in many Asian families. For example, even at the dinner table, if there is a big fish, the big pieces goes to either men or the children, and the women are happy with the head or the tail. So this kind of disparity is always there, and we cannot do much on this unless there is awareness from the society. Or it's many women, maybe they enjoy doing it. So we can't really take it as a kind of, what do you call it? As a disparity or as a discrimination, to be specific. And maybe what I view, look at this as many of the challenges that we have, nicely summed up in the report as an extension of the other societal, in a way, the infiltration of the, or what the society looks at women's right in many other sectors that has come to the fisheries and aquaculture also. But looking at, having said that, I think this is changing a lot in Asia, especially Professor Kiosk suggested that self-help groups may not be a panacea. Yeah, I think we should really look at the value of these clusters. Especially I have seen in India, these groups have really helped women engage together, communicate together, and also kind of empowerment in the real sense has happened. But again, the inside differences between or among women of different levels of society, either separated by income or caste or religion, all these can play, but these are challenges we have to address at a different level. But I think the concept of SHGs, so self-help groups, is a model that can be adopted in many parts of Asia. Other than that, I think what the addition or something extra we can think of is particularly in view of the emerging pandemic-related issues, that we also know that the pandemic had a big impact on the fisheries and aquaculture, especially aquaculture, and what changes or what further challenges this can bring up to the women community is something that we can still look at. And finally, I think we should, Alice has mentioned that in a way, we should also do an introspection, what these exercises have done to improve. Recently, I have visited a seafood processing plant in India, and I was surprised to see that more men are involved in the prawn pre-processing, because they're finding it really hard to get enough labor. So they brought men to do what women were traditionally doing, the peeling and also filleting. But they found these men are quite less productive because they cannot finish the quantity that women were doing it so fast. So this is something that we are not thinking of, because our perception is that women's work is considered as low productive. But in reality, women are more productive, they're more practical, and I think the work quality is much better in the case of women, especially in fisheries and aquaculture. I think in Asia we have a lot more opportunities coming up, and thanks also to GAF and all the leadership, FAO, Worldfish, and Merrill, of course. All of you have been doing all these years. I think that is my perception, and thanks for all the good work.
Thank you very much, Dr. Salim. Thank you, Alice, for those insights and thoughts. So I will give Kyoko the opportunity to respond, Kyoko, before I look at the questions in the Q&A box. Kyoko?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this very insightful comments. It's really, really it really sparks different ideas into the study. For Alice's question about the whole kind of study, whether we are improving, whether we are increasing the number of researchers, are very, very relevant. And then I think it's something that we need to look into a little bit more in detail, because because we haven't really kind of looked at it by years, but then our casual observation shows that it's not really like it depends on the year. So like 2011 there's a lot, and then 2020, 21 there's a lot, and then in between there's kind of not so much. So it is kind of we do not know the reason why, but then there is this skewness in terms of year of publications. But then I think that's very interesting to note that whether there is any 2014 have a push any impetus or not. By the way, for the country and these areas, the top 5, it's like one paper can also talk about both India and Bangladesh. So it's not that if you add all that and then it occupies more of the papers. Is not the case. That's on sometimes it's several one paper can cover several countries. But even with that, the number of studies are very skewed. Also, as you rightly mentioned, the number of researchers are also quite skewed. So it's not that we have a lot of variety of people who are working on it. The number of people that they're actually doing some kind of a gender analysis is quite limited in that sense. So so it's in that sense we do need more systematic effort to increase the number of people who are doing it, because if people are not really trained into it, as you rightly, as Alice had rightly mentioned, it becomes a kind of a just kind of referring to women casually kind of a study. So there's a lot of study like that. They just kind of said, yes, women do this also, but then no analysis as such. There are very few that really tackles gender relations as the core central focus of their analysis. And then that's where we would have this differentiated between a woman study and a gender study, because even if they're talking about women, if that kind of analysis of power relations is there, and then it's a gender study. So that's the place where we also differentiated between gender study and women study. And as you rightly, Alice rightly mentioned, there's a lot of women studies that casually mention about women or have a woman's column in the table, but then no analysis. So we do need to upgrade the analysis into a different level as well. So one more thing about this value chain approach. Value chain approach is quite topical, quite hot in nowadays. But then what is very important in value chain approach is that it's not only to make women's work visible, but then value chain approach should also change the priority of fishery and aquaculture development in a different way, because so that is what is very important about value chain approach. So changing the priority. And also for Dr. Sering have mentioned is also very important that aquaculture becoming more of a business, and then now backyard aquaculture is going to be more and more marginalized. So what are we talking about here now about women's role in backyard aquaculture is something that we really do need to rethink. And then what Dr. Salim was talking about the seafood industry, where now more and more men are coming in. This also happens for migrant workers, where in Thailand, there's a lot of migrant workers coming in. And before it was Thai women who were doing all this work. Now migrant men also take up this work because they also need work. The thing is that this kind of work still remains as low wage. What we do need to see is that actually now men does, and then men cannot do as good as women. So what we need to do is to recognize that actually what women are doing is skilled work. It's not that anybody can do. It's something that we should recognize as skill, which is not happening in many of these fish processing factories or shrimp processing factories as well. So these are very important points that both our discussants have raised. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kyoko, for the response. So let's move to the Q&A. Kyoko, please, there's a question regarding the literature. Does the literature review only include peer-reviewed papers, or does it include non-peer-reviewed literature too? Please clarify that. Over to you, Kyoko.
Yeah, it included both. It included anything actually online. If it's only offline, and then sometimes we do not have the access, so we look at it online. So both the peer-reviewed literature as well as gray literature. So even like blogs and all that, we actually included if it's kind of have some substantial information.
Okay, so here's another one, and probably maybe Dr. Salim can also respond to this. My question is, in regions such as Sri Lanka, where aquaculture is still developing, how best would you suggest to help women get more involved in developing nations in this industry? So maybe you could start, Kyoko, and if Dr. Salim would like to also respond. Over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. So what we also see from literature is that it's quite, the kind of technology or kind of interest that women have for aquaculture can be different from men, or like different among women as well. So it's quite important. If women do not show interest or women are not getting involved, maybe it's because of the way we are approaching, or maybe because of the technology. So we do need specific consultation with women so that we can overcome we can understand the barrier and overcome that barrier.
Dr. Salim, yes, please, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I think the main issue maybe for women to be look for opportunities in aquaculture could be access to the resources, for example, and to the finance. And technology is available. There are a lot of training programs, I think, in Sri Lanka done by NARA or NAGDA. Technologies, locally available technologies are there, but perhaps the women may not have access to finance or the resources, other resources available. I think clustering is a good approach. More women can come together, and then they can bargain for finance, and then it will be much more productive rather than single woman or single woman going for a business. Yeah.
Okay, Alice, please.
Yes, although the question came from Sri Lanka, but I think it's a question that many can relate.
Yes, sure.
I just would like to point out that there's a point there in the paper of Dr. Kusakabe that says about the technical who are into this program. So and they can be the entry point in how we can respond to improving gender equality and so on. Because I think they are the first to be capacitated in all this gender work because they're the ones who will starting the program and so on. So if they're already gender sensitive and all these things, then they know how to approach things at the ground level. So I would really say that that's a first group of people that we should really be looking at, the technical people.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks,
shall I-
Alex. Mhm.
Shall I add a point here, Susan?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
I think for Sri Lanka, the seaweeds, we talked about seaweeds a lot in Philippines and Sri Lanka. It's a big enterprise coming up in seaweeds. And if you look at, again, there is a divide there. The smallholders, they engage in collection and other growing them, but high-level entrepreneurs, they look for value-added products in seaweed. There is a big woman entrepreneur in India who has made a big company out of seaweed extracts, mainly based on seaweed extracts. So this kind of enterprises coming up, and these opportunities can be looked at for women.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Salim. Kyoko, this is again regarding the papers. If you can also find paper published from Pakistan and Nepal, it would be nice. Did you encounter any papers coming from,
Yes,
from those countries?
Yes,
Yeah?
we did. Yeah, but then the number is very small, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So that will be a part of the publication, no?
Yes.
They can find it later.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so moving on. Did the survey, actually it's a desk review. So did the survey look at the improvements in family nutrition as a result of training families and women on aquaculture, integrated vegetable production, and improved human nutrition? The Myanmar Sustainable Aquaculture Program Inland Component and Line Survey has found that this type of training has improved household resilience during the COVID-19 pandemic. Would you like to respond to that? If you encountered, if the papers also look at improvements in family nutrition?
We do. So as long as the paper was talking about aquaculture or fisheries in some way or the other, and then we talk about women or gender in some way or the other, and then it was included. So, but then we have not really encountered a paper that actually measured nutrition improvement. They talk about it does contribute to nutrition. So many do talk about it does contribute to nutrition, but then okay, to what extent, how much, we did not encounter that kind of paper. So if you have it, it would be very good if we can share it with us, because we might have missed it.
Okay. Another one. In India, small-scale fishing activity is not properly recorded, either done by men or women. How is it practically possible to record them? Please give your suggestions. So I suppose the three of you can respond to this. Would you like to start, Kyoko?
Okay. So that's where definition matters, terminology matters, and the understanding what people are doing matters. So what to count and then how to report have to be defined, because in the current way of counting or reporting, these would not be included. So we do need to change the way we count, and so what to count, how to count need rework.
Alice, would you like to follow?
I do agree with Kyoko. It's really difficult. That's why we really need these studies, the small ones that can take a look at case studies. From them, we can really have a good data information. If you, I mean to say, when we do it the government way, we cannot do that. But with studies, with case studies, we can do it. That's why these gender studies are very important to give information on where we are in these issues now. So, but if we are talking about a policy that on how to account for the contribution of men, women, number of hours, or where are the men, women, it's very difficult. So, like for example, in the case of the Philippines, if you take a look at the official statistics, you still see only 10% of the fishers are women. Just 10%. That's the official statistic. So, what can we do? That's the official one. But of course, studies would tell you different information.
Okay. Salin?
Yeah, I think the women's role are not recorded because there may be not much women in the actual core fishing activity, except in the marketing. So many women work in the cooperative sector in marketing, so that's easy to be recorded. But who is actually going for the fishing, just like men do, is quite rare. And I remember in Kerala, in the south of India, a lady who was going for fishing was a hero. She was given much attention and public good publicity in newspapers, TV. So they are held as model women for others. So that means they are very unique pieces. So there are not many. Yeah.
Kyoko, you have your, thank you, Salin. Kyoko, you have your hand up.
Just wanted to add, because I was stimulated by Alice's response that because again, it's we do need to have these kind of small studies in order to identify what should be included, because so that's where we have to identify first. We cannot just say that okay, we don't change anything and then how do we improve? Cannot be the case. But based on the study, we need to identify what would be a very viable indicator that we can capture this hidden work that has been done by women and men and by different women. So we first of all have to identify that and then try to include that in the statistics collection, because that step is not being done in many of the countries, it seems.
Okay, thank you. So this is probably the last question that the three of you could respond, because we are already on the time limit. Regarding publications on gender and women in fisheries and aquaculture, how many really accept papers and articles on these topics? So it's probably asking about where you submit those papers, or how many of these journals. That's how I interpret it. Or what do you know of which of these journals usually? Yeah, it seems that is the question. How many really accept papers and articles on these topics? It's like, where do you submit those kind of papers is how I see it. Well, maybe Kyoko, yeah, Alice.
So if you would like to please do be a member of the gender in aquaculture and the fisheries of the Asian Fisheries Society. We have a conference. We do that every 3 years. Hopefully by next year we can have it. And present your paper. If it's quality paper, we will invite you for publication. And then another option you can have is you submit your paper in Asian Fisheries Science of the Asian Fisheries Society. We do accept gender papers. So please, if you have gender papers, you think they're ready for review, then please submit to Asian Fisheries Science. Please just look for it in the internet. And then again, watch out for the conference of GAFS. We call it GAFS 8. Right, Kyoko? So yes. I'm already announcing it. So we will have another conference next year. So please be ready with your gender studies to be shared in that conference.
Kyoko?
But because there are different focus. Because for example, like fishery-oriented journals, it have to be a fishery journal, fisheries study. And then if you have things on gender, it seems that they are very happy to carry it, because we do sometimes see that this is not really gender, but then still it's being carried. So it might be so they might be very keen to carry gender papers as well. You can also look at like social science literature, but then that one have to be very heavily gender analysis. But then there's not so much studies on fishing communities. So again, they might be interested in looking at it's a new area, so they might be interested in doing that. So so actually you can submit to anywhere, because there's not so much studies being done, as you can see from the number of papers in this region. So I think you have a lot of scope for publication.
Okay. Dr. Salin, you want to have to share something as well?
Yeah, firstly, I think AIT also has a journal published by Professor Kyoko, General Development Studies, so people can publish in that. But what I would like to say something is that we need more dedicated gender scientists, because many gender researchers are occasional researchers. I see many people think it's a very easy area. It's so it's not really easy to work on this kind of social issues. So they realize only after 3 years. So I think if we are dedicated to have very good papers, every journal, relevant journal can accept it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm afraid we have to leave it there. We are 5 minutes past the time, and I hope that everyone enjoyed as much as we did. We thank, of course, Dr. Kyoko for preparing and delivering the presentation, and for the insightful remarks from both Alice and Salin, and of course my colleagues at FAO and colleagues at INFOFISH who in the background for this, who are in the background for this webinar. So as I said, this is the last of the APFIC webinar series 2021. Thank you all for participating in these webinars. And so, yeah, thank you very much and goodbye, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Thanks to INFOFISH, thanks to FAO-RAP.